there. And as we checked for signals, we discovered that there were a few of the younger members of the Molly's pack that had come back on their own, including a huge gray wolf, a young male named 261. And he was howling over here, which was a very risky thing for him to do, because if the alpha wolves of the Druid pack, 21 and 42, heard him, then they would come running, and if they caught him, probably would kill him. However, that howling was something that was worth the risk for him, because specifically a young female Druid wolf, 217, heard him howling. She broke away from her family, slowly and cautiously worked her way in his direction, and by dark that day they were together along with a couple of his friends from the Molly's pack, and that was the very beginning of a brand new pack of wolves. They stayed together. They chose a den site near Slough Creek Campground off in this direction, and they're raising 7 pups right now. Now, one thing that I didn't mention is the connection between the Molly's pack of wolves and the Crystal Creek pack. Do you remember I said that the Crystal Creek wolves originally controlled Lamar Valley? The Druid wolves killed their alpha male. They had to retreat to Pelican Valley, but later they got revenge by killing one of the Druid pups. Well, because they no longer lived in the northern end of Yellowstone, eventually a decision was made to rename the Crystal Creek pack. So as of a few years ago, their new name was the Molly's pack. So that recent history that we just went over was really the recent history of those two deadly rival packs. So in the end, this story becomes sort of a modern-day version of a certain play by William Shakespeare about two rival human clans that hated each other and were always killing each other, but eventually a young male from one clan fell in love with a young female from another clan, and they ran off together. You know what I'm talking about? I'll stop there and see if any of you have any questions you might like to ask. Yes?
I was going to ask, I think it was
length of the wing. Ferruginous, like rusty, iron, ferric. So they've got rust on the wings, the upper wing surface as it goes. Sometimes seen in Hayden Valley. It's one of the reasons I like going there. Once in a while in the fall, you get to see them. They're not real common nesters here. Probably a few nest in this ecosystem. But they're much more common nesters up in Canada, and they'll pass through here. It's been said that for us to see what a raptor can see, what this red-tailed hawk can see, we would need 7-power binoculars. It's not that their eyes magnify, but their eyes can see clearly something that we would need binoculars for. That's how they locate their prey. For many of them, what they're keying in on is motion. Motion that looks like what their favorite prey item is, or looks like something that's weak. All of the raptors have stout-hooked bills for tearing apart the animals that they feed on. Many of them will scavenge, and so by having stout bills, they can rip apart large dead animals, like deer, elk, animals like that. All of the raptors have powerful feet. They have 4 toes. Usually the arrangement is 3 toes forward, 1 backward. Each toe ends in a sharp, piercing talon. The 3 front toes catch the prey. The hind toe, which is equal to our thumb, pushes through, piercing vital body organs and killing the prey. And the size of the hallux, that's right here, gives you an indication of how predatory, how rapacious a raptor is. You're looking at a goshawk foot, and I'll show you a real goshawk foot in a little while. And that's from alive. This one's not the dead one.
guess this is typical weather for this time of year too. Got long hot summer and everything else. But this is what you got living in the Madison and the Gibbon now. And historically, there's photos of old West Slope cutthroats that were this size easy, in there. And we did pick up a couple great. So it's either habitat or pollution, or the only thing that's been changed is we used to have cutthroats. We stocked these guys in there, and we don't have them there. Well, that's probably the reason that we don't have these there. That's pretty much where the common knowledge is. So, okay. Yeah. Okay. So this was our big fish of the year up till yesterday, and they got one yesterday that was 2 pounds bigger than these. So this is 16 pounds, this lake trout was here. Okay. But if you go back to our little graph here, that'd be, if that was a cutthroat, pretty nice sized cutthroat, no problem. No problem. That fish that could eat that real easy. That could eat that. What they've done here on is they've taken out the ear bones off this fish. There's some bones that are called otoliths, and they're equilibrium organs on the side. And out of this fish here, they're probably only about this big. But that's, for lake trout, that's one of the ways that you can age them. And they're kind of like trees, and they will grow one ring each year. It's a little bone. So they took those out so they can try and age this fish here. So this fish is probably going to be, 15 years, maybe 20.
But the water plume will come up, reach its highest point, and then come back down again. A fountain type geyser, we mentioned echinus, that's a fountain type geyser, if we can get into that, and might be lucky enough to see it. It erupts in a series of bursts up out of a pool and splashes lots of water, and they're really exciting too. Every geyser has its own personality, and the names are really descriptive. The acidic nature of this particular geyser basin, it dissolves a lot of clays and silica, and it makes the cloudy, there's that suspended stuff in with. So it's like adding white to paint. And so you get some pastels. You'll see those. Of the acidity of the water, that's why the minerals are deposited in these kind of spicules all over the rocks, and someone thought they looked like echinoderms, and so it got the name echinus. This has some wonderful descriptions of the environment, but the environment was really only a backdrop for a very, very funny social commentary of what life was like at the time. And the author is Rudyard Kipling. And this is his journal entry. He came in, the main entrance to the park at that time, you come in by stagecoach to Cinnabar, and you get on by train to Cinnabar. Then you get on a stagecoach and come up the hill from Gardner, what's today Gardner, and come up into Mammoth, stay at the hotel. That's where you'd spend your first night. Then, by companies after lunch, we walked chattering to the uplands of hell. They call it the Norris Geyser Basin on Earth. It was as though the tide of desolation had gone out, but would presently return across innumerable acres of dazzling white geyser formation. There were no terraces here, but all other horrors. Not 10 yards from the road, a blast of steam shot up, roaring every few seconds. A mud volcano spat filth to heaven. Streams of hot water rumbled underfoot, plunged through the dead pines and steaming cataracts, and died on a waste of white, where green-gray, black-yellow, and pink pools roared, shouted, bubbled, or hissed, as their wicked fancies prompted. By the look of the eye, the place should have been frozen over. By the feel of the feet, it was warm. I ventured out among the pools, carefully following tracks. But one unwary foot began to sink. A squirt of water followed, and having no desire to descend quick into hell, I returned to the shore, where the mud and the sulfur and the nameless fat ooze vegetation of the land lay. But the very road rang, as though built over a gulf. And besides, how was I to tell when the raving blast of steam would find its vent insufficient and blow the whole affair into nirvana? There was a potent stench of stale eggs everywhere, and crystals of sulfur crumbled under the foot, and the glare of the sun on the white stuff was blinding. Wrote a few books later on.
This is our famous mud volcano, the namesake of the entire neighborhood, way up high, sitting above the river here. And mud volcano, gosh, it looks a lot different from what it looked like about 130 years ago when some of the early explorers came through the park and publicized the features in newspaper articles sent around the world. Evidently, if we were lucky enough to be here back in 1870, we would have seen an incredible sight different from what you're seeing today. Basically, fill in the blanks in your imagination here. Fill in the whole hillside, make it a big sort of a cone type of mud volcano, 30 feet wide, bring it up to about 30 feet tall, and on this Washburn expedition that we would have been on back in 1870, what we're seeing at that point is basically kind of a mud volcano action. You've got big, thick globs of hot mud being shot up into the sky, about 150 feet way in the sky, and then all of these mud globs are landing all around us, 200 feet all around us. The trees would have been covered in hot, thick mud. Imagine chocolate-dipped pine trees, that kind of look. Really weird compared to what you're seeing right now. And this is an expedition of businessmen from up in Montana who'd come down to the park to see what sort of features are out there. All these years, the mountain men have been passing along all these tales. So at the end of our travels for that day, after we'd seen the Mammoth Terraces and Tower Waterfalls and the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, it turns out that this was the feature that was the big wonder. It took the cake for the big wow that you would tell your buddies back home. One of the fellows on the expedition, Nathaniel Langford, heads back to the tent that night and writes in the journal that this is the greatest marvel that we have yet come across. So this was the really big, exciting feature.